My name is Justin J. Lee, and I'm a divorce lawyer in Toronto, Canada. And this is Happily Ever Maybe. It's a space for people to share their own stories and advice about their own personal separation and divorce. And I hope that by listening in or watching, you'll gain some comfort, some guidance, or maybe even a little bit of hope. Let's get started. So, Doreen.
Justin.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What do you do, Doreen?
Right now, I am a business person. I'm working on myself and just managing through the aftermath of sort of where I've come, to be honest with you, and just actually finished and finalized my separation.
Oh, how long ago was that?
Probably about 2 weeks ago. Very recent. So,
wow.
I mean, it is a timing moment for me as well to be able to come and be full circle, to say that, you know, I started from here and actually came out, because I think that's really important, because everybody says, oh, you know, going through it. And you can see it and you know you're going to get through something, but I don't really think you know it. Like those are words. Yeah. And they don't, you know, it's just the process. Yeah. But yeah.
And how many children do you have, Doreen?
I have two. Two in 22 and 26.
And are those two children from this separation that you just went through?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting then we say kids, because I think that, you know, we forget that, you know, when you're talking about a family unit and parents, there's not an age, again, numbers being so, you know, specific, that they're always going to be my children. I always refer to them as, you know, you guys are my kids, my children. Yeah. And I don't want to be embarrassed by that. You know, they're adults. Yes, they're adults, but this is the mom talking, not the, not another person, you know, speaking on them. So I think that I think that it's hard. I think that divorce is hard, whether you're in your 20s, whether you're in your 30s, or when you're 10. I think that it just, again, it hits you on how you process it and how you've been able to manage through that, right? The support that you're getting. Because that's really, it all comes down to support, I find.
And how long was that marriage?
35 years. High school sweethearts.
Wow.
Or were we? I guess that's really, that's the, you know, that's the problem. You know, when you say high school.
It was until it wasn't.
Or was it never? Right? Like really. And I think people, you know, you always want to have some like belief of that was something was so great that you stayed, and maybe there was great, but it wasn't what was supposed to be great for the marriage. There was other maybe things that were elements of that. And I think that, you know, the biggest issue is, why did you stay? And it's the number one, you know, when you're married for, you know, 30, 20, whatever it is, and you've been unhappy, I think the biggest question people have is like, or judgment that they will make for anybody is, well, why'd you stay? Why didn't you leave? Right? Whether, you know, nobody understands the process. You can have money and stay. You cannot have money and have to stay. It's not always money, actually. There's a lot of other factors. And I think that, you know, it's hard. It's hard to do all of that and be in it. But
it's very easy to judge. It's very easy to criticize. It's very easy standing outside of whatever dynamic and pinpoint certain things and say, if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have done that. Or like, you can clearly see a way out, but you didn't take it. So we try and sort of pass on that judgment to whoever we're seeing. But the reality of it, and I say this as somebody who sees many people going through a divorce, there's a lot more nuance to any dynamic than anybody outside of that will ever know. And it's a lot more difficult navigating that dynamic than it might seem on the outside.
I think that for me, my reflection would be the person that I was when I met him, which could have been 16 years old. That person was a different person at the age of 25. When I think 24, 25, when we got married, but together. And then I became a very different person when I turned 40 and lost both my parents, from cancer. And then I also was a parent. So I changed in a relationship that's changing. Marriage changes, and you don't even like. I don't think you know. It's you need more than one book. You know, you need courses. You like some people are really successful, and some people need help. You know, and so you know, just because you need help doesn't mean that you can't be successful. You know, people go for tutoring in school to become successful at something. They take extra courses to become better. They want to be a cook, so they learn extra courses. we don't do that enough. And so it was definitely not talked about. Therapy is a very new, it's a new cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And it was never talked about. And that's, the dynamics of, where I think somebody can come in from and leave from is, but I have to say there wasn't a lot of good, but I guess that's the thing. If you had a good marriage, you wouldn't be getting a divorce. It's black and white.
Right.
I mean, it's really, at the end of the day, a marriage is just a relationship of two people who have to figure out living together. The word marriage is just a word like anything else. It's just these words that are from the Webster's dictionary that we focus on. And we put a lot of focus on them, good, bad, and all of those. But the work and what it means is so overwhelming that it's, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to do. And I think one of your messages that I remember seeing was talking specifically about that, somebody said marriage isn't love. It's not all love. And when you think about it, it really is not as much about love. It's about all of the other things, because you have to love all those things to be able to love where you are. And if you don't love, you can't just love one thing about something, and it's so much work. But I listen, I'm a romantic, right? So I tried. When you want something and you're a hard worker, because I worked hard at it.
Yeah.
So,
and how old were you when you married?
Like probably 24, 25.
Yeah.
Right. And then again, didn't have kids until almost 35. Oh. So, I'll tell young people today, like this is, all of a sudden you have experience in whatever it is and you feel like sharing it, right? You meet people and are like, oh, can I give you I want to give you some free advice. You don't have to take it, but just what I've learned in life with whatever it is, tips.
Yeah. I'm curious, at the time that you got married, were you entering into a marriage just because it was a thing that you were supposed to do after being with somebody?
100%. Everything that I did at the time was everything that you shouldn't do. Like if I could make those decisions, that's what you do. You sort of you get to a point and you reflect, right? A lot of life sometimes is, you're fortunate. I love being able to reflect because you try to solve and move forward from that self-reflection, to say, wait, how did I get here? And did I get here? And what did I do to get here? And where do I want to go? And these are the things that I think about, right? Coming forward. But there was nothing but mistakes. I mean, I will share that I know that it was a mistake because he didn't want to get married and he did. And I feel that that's on him because I was truthful. Even if I didn't know everything, I was still truthful to the moment of the time. There's no guarantees, but I really was like, I'm going to, I don't know, what is love anyhow? What is somebody like, we're not in a fairy, like, I don't know where we're supposed to be living this like, moment of, some people have it and some people have different love and some people have different feelings. And I married a little bit of potential, somebody who was young and was still in school. And I thought, I've never seen this person in business. I've never seen them, in working in the world. So, but I assume that, you're in school to be something, and it's potential that I married, and the potential fell through, but there wasn't enough even from the beforehand. So, definitely it was not. He did not want to get married, and he told the best man that at the wedding.
Wow.
Yeah, I found that out. Recently, actually, which is okay. Recently, like really recently, like maybe a month ago recently.
Wow.
And it was okay to hear. It was sort of like, well, that would make sense then. Because I watched the video. I still went back and watched the wedding video. And I went, there's the moments. There's the moment. Like I loved watching it now in a different way because I can go back and kind of be like, yeah, like I should have seen it, but you don't see it. You're watching the movie and you're like, don't you see it? Get out, run. You're trying to talk to them, but they can't hear you.
Yeah.
So,
on one hand, you say that you got married at the time because that's what you were supposed to do. If I heard that about somebody, I would expect that the children would have come very soon after the marriage because that's also something that most people did.
Right.
But for you, there was a 10-year,
because there was no
10-year gap.
Because we shouldn't have gotten married because we weren't in our adult lives for ourselves, right? I was working. I had my career. I've always worked and been very diligent with what I was doing. He was in school, studying. And so, that was I didn't want that. I wasn't in a rush to have kids. I was in a rush not in a rush. I wanted to build a relationship. I wanted to build security. I'm more of a, organized individual. And I thought, well, I'm not going to get married and have kids. Looking back, the best part of that was my kids. And in hindsight, the fact that you brought that up, I wish I would have had the kids early and been done. I almost
really?
I think that I go back.
That's so interesting.
Well, I go back and I can't find anything good. When you're looking and you're going through your closet and you don't need these shoes, you haven't worn them for a long time. You don't feel like you had liked them at one time because you bought them, but now you're moving on. People get rid of their things all the time. They don't fit for whatever reason. The kids that I love, my children, I love them and I'm proud of them, and I'm feeling that is a big part of who I was supposed to be in life. I'm I love being their mom. I wish that I would have had them much earlier, especially having the fact that, I lost my parents so young. That is the thing that you can't change. But I feel that the reason that I was with him was to get them. I wouldn't have them otherwise. And that's really, if I could come out with a solution for myself of, okay, like this, but it wasn't a mistake because I have them. And that's the one thing. I just wish it was earlier.
That's so interesting, because the common narrative is, I wish I didn't have my kids so soon so that I would have had the time to live my life.
Wished I had them right away.
Yeah.
Right
very
away.
Interesting. I don't know that I've heard that before, actually. Was he on board with waiting to have kids at the time?
Sometimes there are people that you meet that are just not, their focus isn't the same as other people's focus. And he's a real individual, goals, things like that. And this is the problem, right? Like, you learn that you're with someone that doesn't have anything in common with you. They don't set goals. They don't really care about anything. They like things that you don't really like. But I didn't have time to learn all that. I was working. He was in school. We're going to get married. We're going to figure it all out. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But we didn't really talk about it. And then as time went, we didn't do anything, or his focus was his focus, which was not me and him. It was really more about, what's good for him. And I, one of the things that I think for me, the hardest thing that I did was that I invested so much of my life into another person, which was, again, that's all I do. When I meet people and I meet couples, I just go right up to each of them all the time. And I'll say, just make sure that you're both individuals. Because I think it's really important. And I think that we don't understand, when you actually, what does that mean? And it means you have to be yourself, and you have to love yourself enough to set your own boundaries. Because if you do all that, then you can have a really healthy relationship with another person, because then you're healthy with your demands of what you want for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't know what I want, then how can I tell you what I want? And I didn't know what I wanted. So there was this, and then when I figured it out, I went, well, you're giving me nothing. And I haven't received anything. And these are things that I, should, whether your expectations are, to have things in a relationship that we all want.
When we talk about concept of boundaries, what I notice is people sort of like to sort of approach it from this framework of, I need to guard myself against my partner or spouse, and those are boundaries. And I need the other person to understand my boundaries, even though it's not ideal. But in reality, the framework should be, the other person should encourage me to have my boundaries, encourage me to not stray away from my own values and what's important to me, right? So the framework isn't I'm working against my partner to set my boundaries, right? The framework is I'm setting these healthy boundaries so that this relationship could thrive.
Right.
Right. And the other person is also in on supporting me, having my own space, boundaries, or whatever we want to call it. Right. So there's this negative connotation for whatever reason that's sort of emerged. And I don't agree with it at all. I think it's not a reactive measure that we're taking when we say we need to set boundaries. It's a healthy relationship needs boundaries on both sides, and both people should
for sure. And I
support that.
think that I'd like to think that some of us through social media have learned these words. We never grew up with the word boundary and feelings and sharing. I didn't. We're different generations, and we just didn't. older generations, it's funny. Somebody said, when you cried when you were little, your parents actually said, stop crying, don't be a baby. That's how parents talk to kids today. Now it's very emotional, cry and, show it all and wear it all and all day.
Yeah.
But it was, don't you start crying. Like, you keep your emotions in. And so, depending on where you fell into the spectrum and how you were brought up, don't cry. Don't let them see you cry.
Yeah.
And that's really how I kind of was brought up. But we all cry and we all have to cry because that's happy and sad. I don't think that that's normal. It's not a good thing for us not to let emotions out because we're humans and that's part of our, that's part of the DNA that we're allowed to do and share emotions. But not everybody can handle emotions. You have to be able to handle that person crying too. So there's so much that goes on with relationships. And when you're young and you don't know yourself, and the other person doesn't know themselves, how are they going to know who you are and what your needs are when I can't even express to them what my needs were at that time because 25 is nothing. My daughter's 25 and I look at her and I'm like, I hope that they have learned, which I think they have, some of the realities of, what happens to you if you don't protect yourself and also, set those boundaries. But one of the words that I had never heard of, and I'm just curious from your end from the loss and divorce, the word narcissist. I never really heard that word I didn't even know that word really existed in my day-to-day life because I was working and didn't really think about it until I sort of delved into the world of learning and just, Instagram will, give you all of it. And all of this is out there. And that seemed to be the word. I learned it. And then I was married to a narcissist and I didn't even know what that was. And so is that something that like, when I look at, why do two people not get along? It could be for, I call it the marriage box. I made a reference to it because I thought it was really interesting how we sometimes, work, and put things into like these like sort of categories. And I just feel that sometimes, it's not just, marriage is not just about sex and, intimacy and like there's so many things that lead to, life problems. But being a narcissist, is that something you hear a lot about? Like, do they come in, people and be like, I'm married to a narcissist. What are you hearing from why my marriages don't work out?
It's the word of the decade, I think.
Right, but that's
especially
the thing.
in the world of divorce.
But he was that when I met him, and I told him when we were dating, as I remembered, I used to always say to him, "You think you're so great," and I felt that about him because I thought he was actually always smarter. He was the one going in to be, to medicine. I wasn't. I always assumed that, you're the smart one in the family, right? Like, I'm going to support you. I'm business, I'm doing whatever, but like, you're really smart, math and science for sure. That's another, misconception. It was way more impressive if somebody was going to that road, back in the 80s and still, right? Like you would assume somebody's got some clout behind them that they made it into medical school. You must be smart. Somebody thought you were smart. However, I think that, I used to always say to him, "You think you're so great." And I said it a lot. And I was young and I knew that there was something wrong. But the word narcissist wasn't around. Going back now, I would just go, "You are a narcissistic person. That's what you think you're so great is about." So I knew for years, but I didn't know who I was to even understand what that was and that would be something that would never change. And that's really where I see a lot of, and I've seen a lot of, marriages over the years. Usually it's always the same problems. It's infidelities, cheating, and narcissism and not being truthful because I think that there's no reason when you're with a partner, because the marriage is the business, which I learned too. Like it's not, you're getting into a business. You should just call it the business plan because that's really needs to narrative change. People are going to lose everything they have. Women, men, just because of a mistake. Maybe they don't need to, like maybe they didn't realize it. Maybe their intent wasn't that. Maybe they didn't cheat. Maybe all of those things. But I think that those all get wrapped up into that same box that then gets unraveled. Right. And that's the unraveling to me and how it gets unraveled, right? You can open up a package really nice or you can unravel it, and rip it apart.
To address your first point about the word narcissism being the hot word, the clinical definition of the word narcissist is probably narrower than how people like to apply it in their
Well, it's
everyday lives.
psychological. It's an actual psychological disorder, like right down to the core. And there's a lot of other issues that are part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think for somebody to have narcissistic tendencies is one thing.
Right.
For them to be an actual narcissist is another. But when people sort of label their partners as a narcissist, I think where they're coming from is there's clearly an imbalance of where each other's priorities sit, right? From the alleged narcissist's perspective, their priority is themselves. And depending on the degree to which they're quote unquote a narcissist, there's very little that they will allow to trump their self as the priority in their life. For the other person, they are much more of a giver. They're a lot more selfless. And so when the two of them sort of enter into a dynamic.
Yeah. And they find each other. They're really good at finding each other sometimes.
Well, right. Because one is the receiver, the other is the giver. And there's
Exactly.
actually a lot of fulfillment that the giver gets from giving.
I love being a caregiver, right?
There you
and
go.
and I'm
There
not,
you go.
and again, that is as a personality, right? Like I love helping people as if you can. So of course, I'm going to be attracted to that person much more than somebody else who isn't already that, right? And doesn't that boundary for sure.
And I think in the beginning, it's for a little while, that's manageable, right? Because usually also at the same time, those people are often very charming, very smart, very capable. So it can all sort of exist under this guise of ability and capability, right? And charm and just, all those things that you would typically look for in a partner. And let's also consider the fact that having a partner that's like that does come with perks, right? If the other person, albeit they're, self-absorbed or whatever, is a high-earning, career person and they can bring in the money to the household. If they socially, they have situated themselves at a place where it also elevates your social status, right? So, in your mind, you're playing this little game of, well, I'm not necessarily in a dynamic that I'm happy, but at the same time, I am getting all these benefits, right? Money, you can't ignore that. And social status, also another huge component. And I think that goes back to why sometimes it's very hard for people to leave a dynamic is because it's not all bad.
Right. I think that there's a time, the time from when somebody says, I'm not happy and I'm thinking about leaving to, when that actually does happen, that can change. That could be years. That could have been 5 years for me. I don't remember. I don't, there wasn't a lot of happy for a long time, but the timing of life when you have kids, when you have what I have from my personal experience, talking just a little bit of my own personal coming into this, I feel like I stayed in a marriage longer than I probably should have. And I question myself, why did you do this? Like, I'm pretty intelligent. Like, let's have this conversation, Doreen. Let's try to get down to the bottom of this. Like, why did you do this? Well, I'll tell you why. Because you invested your life, which I did, in his career. And I gave up my career that I had to work and build his career, which I was very successful in. So I created not only his career, but then I created another company within his company. That was my company. So, wow, I have a career. And we have a career where we have this company and now we have this bad marriage, but we have a really good business. Well, there you go. Business is business, and you have two businesses, the marriage business and you have your business. I got, I didn't think about it this pragmatic. Like I wasn't this like at home, like, oh, I'm going to, I wasn't, I was I was like, this is going back, but yeah, that is the biggest regret was that not only did I jump into the business end, which as a business person, I'm, again, divorce and everything else. Who knew? I didn't know anything, but there was no discussion for who's in charge of the business. How will the business, if we don't get along one day, who's going to take over the business? it's my business too. I've invested my 10 years here, 20 years, whatever it is. That to me is why I couldn't get out, because we could not figure that out, and I couldn't figure it out, and I had to stay, which is sad because I loved the job. I loved my career much more than I valued the relationship. But going to work and seeing the same person that you're not getting along with day after day is not going to make your life any better. So things that really didn't help anything when we already had problems, and then you have to go and try, which he didn't do as good of a job as I did, to keep your personal and your business separate when you have people there. These are other issues, and then that's the snowball, it's a bit of a ball, and then you can either grasp the snow and get to it, right? And break it up a bit before it gets too big and figure life out, or it's just going to take it over. And that's eventually, well, a little thing called COVID happened. Little thing happened.
I'm curious, when you say that, I invested so much into his life.
Yeah.
And that's why you couldn't leave. Is it more so that, you built something so great within his life, in his career, let's say, that it was really hard for you to walk away from just because,
well, I did.
Because it was something that you also built, or was it more that you were uncertain as to whether you were going to be able to sustain yourself outside of that in your own career?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my career was a company that was created that he owned. Again, we're talking about business, marriage is business. And so then when you start a business with the person that, normally if I would have opened a business with you, there'd be a paperwork trail saying you and I just opened a business. And if we don't get along in this business, there's shares, there's whatever we're going to do, but you have hopefully a good business. Why do you want to break that down? We're going to take that business, try to do something with it, split it. That was never discussed. So for me, when COVID hit and everything else, timing is, really the spice of life. I go back to, because you might want to do something, but the time isn't the right time. And sometimes it isn't. Yeah. Sometimes timing is that moment. And, I think that's my biggest disappointment, is that I did end up having to give up the career. I did have to do that. It is gone. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that was really unfair, and that was unfortunate, but it wasn't dealt with properly because of the marriage. So there's a taking advantage, he took advantage of me because it was in his name from a technicality point. If the bank account is in your name, but I'm putting the money into the account, from a technicality, I'm not getting that money.
Yeah.
Like, this is just sort of like the behind the scenes, but like, for the way that I look at it, that was my company, and so there's a lot that you give up, but you have to, we talked really briefly about the word settlement, there's that whole term, and the whole thing with divorce is just, it is its own sort of book at the end, like its own thing, because every word means something. What does settlement mean? Well, everybody's going to settle on something, but is it a settlement?
Yeah. Was there a pivotal moment that you can remember that you knew this marriage was done?
I think there was. I mean, I had filed for a divorce in 2015, and I didn't divorce him until, the second time around, until 2021, which was February 2021. When I realized that was the last straw, and that was exactly the day. The day, there is a day. And we talk about separation date, because that's a really great, that was a lot of fun too, because he had dates, I have dates. I'm like, what is the difference? We could go back to 1975. Like, what's the difference? Like, it doesn't mean anything. I get that it means something, but it becomes, everything takes so drawn out, and so like, I'll tell you, this was the date. And funny thing is he could never defend his date anyhow. So I knew. But I was working, and in 2015, I was in the heat of, I was working. I had young kids. Money was important. Money's always important. How would you like to pay bills when you're self-employed and you run the business? You just can't quit.
Yeah.
You just don't quit. That's not a thing. I don't know how, not for me. I tried to get a divorce, and I had to call off the divorce. I did. It was all on me. And I said, okay, it's just too much. I have to get back to work. And I have to get back to my life, and I'll make it work for another, I don't know. But I had made that decision. I knew it wasn't good, but I tried to make it I went in trying to make it work, which sounds crazy because it was such a bad, nobody thought this was like, no, this is not like a, oh my God, you guys were really at one point. No, there was nobody thought this was good. It was bad. You know, when something's just a bad movie and they just keep making repeats of it, like why? That Friday the 13th one, like each movie is just sort of becoming more and more of a spinoff, but they're not good, you know? And I just, it's unfortunate how we stay because we have to stay.
And that first time around when you suggested divorce or filed for a divorce,
well,
that
it's
wasn't
the wording of all of it, right? Like, because I had hired a lawyer and they sent him out some paperwork. I think is how it started. While I was working, he received a letter. I mean, imagine I'm in my office and he's in that office, and he got to deal with the divorce. Like, where am I going to give it to him? At home? Okay, I served him and I gave it to him there. I mean, it was just a really. It's not, but there's nothing pleasant about any of it, and so it was hard.
And when you eventually decided to call it off, that wasn't like a wake up call moment for anybody to try and make the relationship actually work.
Well, I think that I think that again, you know, you need two people to do something. And at the end of the day, I don't think that he was the right person. And I'm glad that this happened. Like, I'm very happy. Like, I could have easily stayed another 10 years. I probably, if COVID didn't happen, I don't know. Right? Like, things happened that got us to where we are. And sometimes I think if it didn't happen, I might still be completely unhappily married. I was just an unhappily sad person, you know, not knowing how to get out. Sometimes I didn't even know how. I didn't really know how. But then I had to figure it out, which was still really hard. It was still really hard, but I knew that was it. Like, I did have that. I didn't have that in 2015. I was distracted. I had way too many things that could distract me. I was less distracted. My kids were older and I had taken enough. I think that was really it. I mean, I finally got to a point where it's like, this is not, you know, I'm not going to make it out.
And how was that? What was the process like for when you were breaking that news to the kids? I mean, they were older, so that's a little different.
I think that they were definitely happy. I think that, you know, I know that they would have probably, you know, again, kids, right? You know, young, old, what we do, thinking about how they're going to be impacted. It was COVID. Everybody was home. You know, it was, I think that they had grown up with so much screaming and so much, you know, he's not a nice person. He's just not a nice person to other people. It's not, you know, when you're not a good person to your own kids, when you're not a good person to other people, that's when I really started noticing. It was like, wow, you're not really treating me well, but you're also not treating your kids well. And now those are like, that's it. You could treat me well, but it's like, you said something about my kids, right? Like, you know, that mama bear. And I think that I started becoming, you know, trying to protect them. I mean, that's all we do. All we try to do, you know, is try to, you know, make sure your kids are protected in a scenario if they're being hurt. And I felt like, you know, they're happy and they're much happier for me. They understand, you know. I think kids grow up and they can, you know, I never said anything to them. I think that they always, you know, if somebody's name calling you at the dinner table, they can hear that that's not normal when they go to their friend's house, that their father didn't name call their mom at the dinner table. I don't have to be, I'm shocked. I'm embarrassed for myself that this person who's smart enough to know that you should have, you know, there's however you're going to, you know, speak with people. I have, you know, really high expectations and demands for that. But no, I think that they're happy. They're definitely
generally
happy.
The children know so much more than the parents realize. The parents can do, they can try very hard to shield them from all the conflict, but I think the reality, right? The reality is it's very difficult to pull off, and the children often know a lot more than the parents believe, and so the common narrative is when the parents end up getting a divorce, you know, their response is good, or that you should have done it sooner. Actually,
no, I think for sure neither of my kids. I mean, they've been both very supportive, and I think that they're just really happy that I'm in a place where I'm happy and safe. And I think that's really all kids want from their parents, either one, you know, if it's on either side, is that, you know, they want their parents to be happy. You want happy parents, you know, it's a happy family dynamic, obviously. Right.
See, and this is another sort of shift in framework that I think we need. You know, we often think about, we need to provide our children with the best set of circumstances. In an ideal world, yes, a nuclear family, yes, a harmonious sort of dynamic between every member of the family, what have you. But if you are keeping that for the sake of keeping it at the expense of actually being happy yourself in that marriage, it often does more harm than good. And so I think that also, again, goes back to that first idea where we talked about how you need boundaries, but not because you're trying to protect yourself, but because that's what's good for the relationship, right? Whatever dynamic, whether it's children, your spouse, you need to be content, happy, fulfilled yourself for you to be able to express your love and care towards the other person, towards others. And for you to be in that place, you need boundaries. Right?
Yeah, you have to, because boundaries give people safety. A boundary is a fence, a door, whatever it is. That's how we've always known, like a boundary, that's my property line. Whatever it is, we have boundaries. We grow up with those around us, but we don't focus, I feel, enough about, like, we don't teach people boundaries. I didn't teach my kids boundaries in a way that was you know, when they were little. You know, we respected people, which is the same thing. You don't touch, you don't take. You know what's yours. Those are boundaries. You don't take somebody else's lunch because you felt that cracker was yours. I mean, they start right from the very beginning of time, which comes back to, you know, getting married should have some more education, and having kids. I think most people some people shouldn't have kids because it's really a lot of work. This is a lot of work, and they don't stop at 22. Like, kids are your kids. They're part of your dynamic DNA. And I don't feel that, you know, part of what what I'm seeing, the biggest shift is, you know, the family unit has been so fractured and cracked over the years of what society says, you know, you have to move out at a certain time, or if you live at home too long, there's something wrong with you. You know, all of these, there's so much pressure to pull the family apart. That why should the family be like? I'm not surprised that there's not enough more family units, because so many families and very close friends of mine are, you know, everybody can have so many problems with our families and children and everything else, when all we wanted was to have them with us. That's why I had children. And if you don't want your children with you all the time, guess what? Don't have kids. Don't. We're not here just to produce a worker so they can be at the Canada Post Office in 20 years. And I did something about that, but I didn't see them. That's not what this is about. You know, it's a long process, and kids need a lot of support, or they're going to be citizens of the society without any of that to work with the rest of us who maybe have had it. And that's that whole other sort of where we all are going to meet and not necessarily understand each other as fairly. Right. But yeah, I didn't realize that divorce was such a business until, I mean, like anything else, right? You don't know about something if it's not on your plan. Like, it's not, even if I wasn't happy, I wished that I did more research. Like, I literally woke up one day and said, I'm going to get a lawyer. Like, I didn't think it, like, I wasn't like, I was very emotionally charged for a business person who's very like paper oriented. No, I was an emotional basket case. I wanted him out of the house. Yeah. That was what I wanted. You know, what did you wake up on that day? What did you want? Yeah. Out of the house. Yeah. That's all I could think of. Yeah. You know, and then the process to get to that is the time of the system. Yeah. I mean, education, I think we can say, is a key to a lot of all these issues that we talk about, particularly for marriage, for example, and the culture is shifting now to people acknowledging that marriage and having children are not, well, they're no joke. And so, you know, being educated. And you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. Right. You know, I mean, again, there's this whole pressure, like, well, if you've been dating for more than 5 years, I mean, things again are changing. People now are not necessarily, which is why common law wasn't always a thing. Nobody just lived with people. That became something, I feel, over time more common. Right? Whereas before, you got married And that's how it was, or you lived in sin. You know, it was very like, hush, you know, they're not really married.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't matter. You know, society is so opened up to all of the opportunities and options. But I think that anybody getting married today, no matter what age, no matter how much you have in the bank, you need to speak to a family care lawyer, not a divorce, because I wouldn't see a divorce lawyer for that. I'm getting married. And again, it's like insurance. You know, I had this discussion with someone. If you buy a brand new car, if you buy a brand new Ferrari, you're planning on taking care of that. You love that car. It was expensive. You were excited about it. You still have to get insurance.
Yeah.
Because the risk of the accident is there, and you don't want to not have your insurance. And I really believe that that's the marriage. The marriage can be amazing, and you would never, like life insurance. People buy life insurance not because they know one day they will eventually die, because that's how it works. You want to protect everybody around. Just take it off the table and not look at it again. I think that it should be mandatory. You know, I Googled divorce lawyers. That's it. I just Googled it, which is absurd, actually, which is why I'm not necessarily like surprised that the beginning of my journey ended up like this, but I also didn't want anybody to know, and I didn't know anybody divorced. So if you don't know anybody divorced, everybody's married, happily married, and I didn't want anybody to know that I was doing this. It was very bad. Everybody was actually very scared. I mean, we got to go back to COVID when people were wiping down groceries. This was like the very beginning of like not good. And I'd called a lawyer and found him through Google reviews, and just called and said, you have to help me, you know, and just sort of emotionally. And I you know, that whole conversation of what had been going on, and I need to get him out of the house, and can you help me? And, you know, they had said no problem and sent a very aggressive letter just from some information. And I think that what happened was I never really got involved with any of it. I said, okay, fine. Like I don't even know if I read it. I mean, emotionally, I am going through my own, like what is happening. And then I don't really understand. There's not a lot of information when I called lawyers. They all were like, interestingly enough, which was why I say go to lawyers, who's the other lawyer? This is the first lawyer. It's the first thing, question one, why? And then I would tell them who his lawyer was. And he didn't have a lawyer for a while, which is another thing. It's such a game. Like he doesn't have a lawyer. This one doesn't have a lawyer. This one changes lawyers. And so again, I didn't understand, right? I came from a business. I knew my business. I didn't understand the lawyer business. But I started getting really upset when lawyers that I would call and be like, hi, I'm looking to get some information. You know, whether you'd be the right lawyer for my case, when I started, you know, spending some time trying to find that right lawyer. And they'd say, oh, yeah. Who's their lawyer? And I'd say, oh, yeah, you're going to have a fight on your hands. And I said, really? Okay, interesting. That doesn't make me like, that already upset me, because why are you using the word fight? That's just another problem. Like, I'm not sure why another person who doesn't know anything about the case is already saying that the lawyers, that's just why I come back and say, this is not the first time I've heard it. You know, I want to, you know, there's lawyers that have a reputation. And so, you know, you hear the lawyer's name, you hear it, and you're like, okay, so you're already got anxiety. Now, how am I supposed to feel about that? I'm not happy. So what I ended up doing, because so many lawyers seem to be so nervous about their law firm, I self-represented. I said, you know what? I'll just do this myself, because everybody's pretty nervous. And I don't care anymore. And I actually had nothing to be afraid of, because I didn't do anything wrong. And I think that lawyers want to make you think you've done something wrong somehow, you know, with whatever. And I think that you all, you know, the system works that no matter what somebody tells you, you listen to it, and you don't do any fact checking either, which is, again, part of the problem. It's almost like, you know, it's like the principal is the lawyer in a way, like the court, and there's that sort of hierarchy. You have two kids in the playground, me and him. So we show up, and I'm telling you my story. And that's really what this is, like a bickering, and you've heard it all. Like, you know, I'm sure you've heard it all, right? But you need to be able to take that package to do a good job and go, okay, out of this, probably 30% is true. Let's just really take some of this out. But lawyers are lawyers make money. Lawyers make money per hour, and there's That, my friend, is the ticket that is on the other side. So, sometimes that was my struggle. My struggle was about the money. My struggle was about that I did not want to, pay for somebody else to not even listen and understand. And I think until I self-represented, that didn't change. I hired the first lawyer through Google and never met him in person. I only, obviously, I did a quick Zoom with him. He sent out this and the lawyer's email, the letter, and I had read it, and I was sending him a lot of messages and calls and saying, I need to speak to you. I'm not this letter has really made him angry. I hadn't spoken to him, never returned any phone calls. There were 2 weeks to 3 weeks of never receiving a phone call or an email. And I started freaking out from the lawyer. And I'm like, wait a minute, things are getting really bad in the house. I haven't heard from you. I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand the process. I went to another lawyer because I didn't want to be with that lawyer anymore. It's really weird. It's a really weird thing. It's like looking for a pair of shoes and you can't find them. You just keep going to different shoe places because you need these shoes. I need a lawyer. And again, through COVID, not knowing anything, not speaking to anybody. And then I ended up finding a woman lawyer who I called, who decided after hearing my story that she was so upset that the other lawyer hadn't given me back my retainer money for not returning my call. She called the other lawyer, didn't ask me to do anything, nothing. This nice person who I had a conversation with called the other lawyer, had a conversation. The other lawyer gave me back my retainer money, got it all back. So it didn't cost me any money. I couldn't work with her because she was too expensive of a lawyer, but she did help me at the very beginning. And that was back in 2021. Okay. In 2021 in March when all this was going down. And then I said, okay, I'm going to not do a lawyer again. I'm going to have to find the right lawyer. So I decided I'm not, because that didn't work. I didn't want that kind of lawyer. Didn't return my calls, sent really bad letters, didn't want that. So then I started looking for another lawyer. And then I was just interviewing lawyers, trying to figure out what kind of questions to even ask, what I needed. And everything is very difficult because, what lawyers wanted to hear is, again, where's the package? There's a little package ball. Are we talking, is it kids related? Is it, I understand that. But I think that for me, I needed a lawyer that I wanted to listen, that I wanted to work with. And that's really interesting because lawyers don't like to necessarily work with their clients. They don't. You might think that they do, but they don't. I've worked with, they are in charge and you have given them, and I think that's the role a little bit too. I think that my understanding with the court and the way that the family law, because I read so much of it, is that when you hire a lawyer to represent you in court, they are representing you. And you do need to sit back, and that's what you have paid for. And they are the ones that represent you, good or bad. And that is the role that they take. So you better make sure that whoever's representing you has your words too in there, because I'm the client. And I feel a lot of times divorce lawyers, because I've worked with a lot of other lawyers, and they don't necessarily feel like that. But divorce lawyers forgot sometimes that I am the client and this is my life and I have things that I want them to be done, even if they're out, not that what you did on that last case. And I wanted that. And it's not very common, and it isn't. A lot of lawyers are they want to do things their way. And I fired my lawyer. I got another lawyer that I thought it was a man lawyer, the first lawyer. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go for a woman lawyer. Maybe that'll make a difference. Maybe she'll understand more. I don't know. You're thinking, these are things that you think of. Okay. I worked with her. I thought she looked like, I had a referral. Thought this was going to be a good scenario. Had been going for about a year with this one lawyer. She wasn't returning calls. She went away for 3-4 weeks at a time, 6 weeks at a time. I'd call every day crying, where's to her secretary. This was a horrible scenario. This is on top of my trying to get a divorce. Now I'm chasing a lawyer. Okay. I fired that lawyer. Then got another lawyer, and that lawyer did not respect me, my wishes about things that I wanted to be done. So you have to gain control. I think I'm here today to tell people that you need help, but you better be in control of your own life. And until I did that, because I thought the lawyers could, nobody can do, they can't do your marriage. They can't do anything. You need to know what you want and demand that for yourself, and then work with someone who hears you and sees you. And I did that. And I found a lawyer. When I say a self-represented, I found a limited scope, which was really hard to find and not easy and really its own struggle, and should be more available and more, because that was the best experience I had. When I did find the right lawyer to work with me and let me drive the boat a little bit and with assistance, I had no lawyer on November the 1st. I had no lawyer, and I was served the Form 8 for that. And I needed to respond to everything, and I had no lawyer, and I got everything settled, and whatever date we are on June 12th, the paperwork was signed. And that wouldn't have been done with any of the other, if I never changed, if I did not do what I did, which everybody said was crazy, right through, which I knew it was crazy, but I had to trust myself that crazy was the only way out. You have to believe in yourself. And I think that's...
Family law is it's a peculiar area of law, I'd say. It is quite niche, and I'll explain. In virtually every other area of law, generally speaking, it's all business. There's no emotions. With family law, you've got a lot of emotions, and emotions, generally speaking, run directly against what might be considered rational. So to speak to your, the dynamic you were speaking about between the client and the lawyer, and I do want to be fair to both lawyers and clients here. So let's say from the lawyer's perspective, on one hand, they know that they have to be the voice of reason when the client cannot be in that state because of all the emotional stuff that they're going through. But at the same time, they have to be human towards their client. So they're playing this really tricky balancing act of, on one hand, being sort of hand-holding, if you will, of the client, but at the same time being stern enough to tell them that things should be this way or that way, and to guide them through the process.
Well, I think what I didn't learn is that the emotional component is so tightly tied up in what you need for the divorce paperwork that unless you get the emotions out, until my emotions were off the table, I couldn't speak to anybody. It didn't really matter. But I think that before lawyers even, what should have happened when I called in that first day, or anybody calls in an emotional state, lawyers need to work with therapists that they can make a quick referral to. That, again, everybody's working in the same industry. And remember, there's a difference between different therapies. There's therapy that offers direction, and then therapy that offers sort of a summary, okay, that are available, independent assessors that don't treat. They're not offering a treatment, but they are offering a summary to you to say, this is what's happening here. And that summary will give you and everybody some information, because you can't get away from it. Because I cried so much. I wasted thousands of dollars talking to the lawyer because I was crying, trying to make them understand something that they were saying, whatever it is. But you need to you want to have a successful outcome. Some lawyers, their successful outcome is, if we can make this go 8 years, it's great. And we can't take away from the system is set up like that. There is no, there's no close time. And a divorce can cost millions of dollars. That's nonsense. Nobody should be spending millions of dollars to try to get a happy life. I'm sorry, it seems ridiculous. And there's no cap. It's just, you just keep going. You just keep going and going, and you haven't paid your support. Okay, just keep going and fighting. That system doesn't make sense to me. It may never make sense, because I'm very, clear cut that there has to be a place where somebody says, okay, we're getting close to the threshold. You're only allowed to spend $100,000 in divorce in Ontario, whatever it is. Come up with some number, and that's it. And I think if you've only been, I think that there could be so many better solutions solved for people. Is it better for lawyers or the system? I don't know, but I don't care about them. I'm looking at the people. I'm looking at us. nobody gets the marriage life certificate without knowing that you signed off that you also are giving up on your prenup.
Yeah.
Because when you go to court, just like financial disclosure, you have to claim that you've seen all the financial disclosure to make your agreement so you can sign off on an agreement. Well, you don't get to do any of that in marriage. It's 10 seconds. Yeah, sign it, go. Now, I think things are changing, but it should be signed documents so that when you get back into court, did you know that on that day when you got your marriage certificate that you also confirmed that you knew that that person had $8 million in their bank account or whatever it was? Disclosure from beforehand. That would certainly, because it's a business agreement, just saying, would alleviate. It's not going to solve all of the problems. You're still going to need court. You're still going to have people that do all of those things. Will it solve 10%, 5%? Maybe. So take them out. What do we need them in for? Give people an opportunity, maybe. And I saw somebody recently who called off their marriage because the spouse would not sign the prenup. And that is happening now too. Like, if you don't want to sign the prenup, we shouldn't get married. Not everybody's getting married at 20. I had no car, nothing. It's great. Potential, right? It's all this potential that you didn't know about. At least understand what happens. People still don't know today that the matrimonial home, if it was paid for, I just read something the other day. Well, I bought the home and we're getting a divorce. She doesn't deserve any of the house. I bought it. People still don't know that, right? Common. Find that out. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you don't. But it's better to do it right now, isn't it? But lawyers need to educate. The lawyers need to enter in instead of sitting in their offices and scaring off people and going, I'm the shark. That's really, I don't know where it came up from, but this has been on a very long, like, you want a shark. I want a shark of a lawyer. Why does somebody want that? You have the worst people, the two people here that are, not getting along. You don't want an aggressive person. No lawyer should be aggressive. They should be the opposite of aggressive. No lawyer, no shark should be allowed in. Because that's not going to solve necessarily where we're going. Yeah. That's the problem.
I will push back a little bit. The general perception of lawyers, and especially divorce lawyers, because and it is true that a lot of money does get sunk into the process and people spend a lot of money. Generally speaking, I disagree that lawyers have an incentive to draw out the process because it means more money for them. There is so much work in family law that lawyers do want it to settle and they want it off their desk as soon as possible because that's good for everybody. But what is true and what is an issue that could be worked on is lawyers don't necessarily have the requisite settlement skills. They don't necessarily have the requisite communication skills to be able to facilitate a settlement that might benefit everybody in the most efficient way as possible. And so both the lawyers and the clients play a role in this process called a divorce. And there are lawyers who are more aggressive than necessary. It is also true that lawyers at the end of the day are representatives of the client. So if you have a difficult client, if you have a client that just will not listen to reason to their own lawyer.
How do you deal with that?
Then the lawyer has two choices.
Okay.
They can resign from the case.
Okay.
Or they just have to be the mouthpiece for the client.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think about, what is your opinion on clients negotiating with lawyers off the side? So, for example, if I'm saying, you know what, I'm going to do my best to negotiate off, I'm going to try to make a deal with him off the side, whatever it is, how do you feel about your clients speaking to their spouses, trying to make deals that maybe you're working on a different deal, but I'm going to, whatever it is, how do you like that? Like, how do lawyers look at that? Do they prefer that we just not speak at all, or?
It depends. I can't speak for all lawyers, obviously. The only time that I would suggest no communications is if there's abuse, if there's a serious power imbalance, that any kind of negotiations or communications is just going to be detrimental to my client, right? So in those instances, I would say...
But you feel that it could be beneficial in the right scenario, then you would encourage like 100%. Anything. Because I think that that's what happened, is that we were getting to such a stall that I ended up, even though I didn't want to, I didn't want to. I needed to communicate more with him.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the two people that are going to sign that paperwork are me and him. The lawyer's witness, but if he doesn't sign and I don't sign, there will be nothing to witness. So ultimately, one of us, we both have to agree to agree, even if there's no agreement. And so that was a big part of what I did. You know, I think that benefited the proceedings of the divorce. It's a very interesting. I felt that divorce became very calculated, much more than I thought about in the marriage. The marriage, you just wake up and you have a bad day and you have a bad day. But to get divorced, there was a process. Like every day I woke up, it was an 8 to 10 hour day easily for my filing to get everything done and to be organized, and just the process of it and the timing and the timelines. And like, you have to be a lawyer. 10 o'clock, you get served. You've got 3 days from the 10 a.m. Like the time, like they don't make anything easy. The system doesn't make it easy, even for a smart person to manage it, to upload your documents, to do any of those things. Everything had to be. I tried writing out my own, you know, the Form 10 in response. It's so difficult. It was like so challenging in the PDF, everything, you know. And so I did my best to learn it. But, you know, at the end of the day, I needed to work with someone that heard me. And I think that's what I encourage people to do. I did find a great lawyer. I loved my lawyer. I wouldn't be where I am without the representation. But the difference was that I found between all of the lawyers that I interviewed, and really the importance coming back to where I can give somebody help. We need a lawyer. You need a lawyer. What type of lawyer and to what capacity, that's the level that I'm speaking about. And I felt that for me, searching and finding that one person that, funny enough, I found on Google from looking at a different search engine for self-represented and things like that. But I found someone who worked with me on the file, and we worked together on the file, and I worked on the file, and that's how we managed it. And he listened to me. And I think that that's what people need to do, is that they need to find the right fit.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel that the person you're with, even though they're a lawyer, because we can become intimidated, lawyers are intimidating. I was told by my lawyer that, you know, she was really disrespectful. And I felt like, wow, like, you know what? You have to be in a position when you're feeling disrespected in the worst time. And I think not all lawyers are equal. And that's what I'm saying. Don't stop.
100%.
Find the person that will hear you, that sees you, and that can get you to where you want to go in the best place, in the best vessel, because that's all you are. You're just a vessel that we're putting our stuff in and hoping that it gets to where it has to go, because it's just that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's also the information that,
No,
that
you
we
raise a
give
good
you.
point. And in fact, so at every one of my consults, for example, anybody that's done a consult with me will know, because I repeat the exact same phrase every time. I say to them, just because you have consulted me does not mean you have to retain me.
Right.
Please go get second, third opinions
Right.
if you want to. I don't want you to feel any pressure in retaining whoever, because at the end of the day, and this is part of what I tell them, at the end of the day, we're dealing with your life, and who you entrust with your life, you have to be comfortable with that person. I may not be that person for you. The other person might be a better fit, and for other people, I might be a better fit. But to your point, it is important that you go out and find the right lawyer, because not all lawyers are equal. And even among many competent lawyers, there are different styles, and one style might fit you more than the other. And you know, everybody might be able to get you to the same legal conclusion, but as you'll probably know, in hindsight, having gone through this process, divorce is only half of it really is legal. Other half is personal. It's emotional.
Well, that's where that's why I wished that divorce attorneys and firms, especially the bigger ones, had someone that they could say, hey, you sound emotional. Like before you even talk to a lawyer, because you're going to waste your time and money, because I don't think I should have spoken to the lawyer right away. I needed emotional support for divorce. You're right. You need somebody that knows divorce business. That's all they do. And they're just listening. And you know what? You're going to get a piece of paper back, and it's going to say, listen, separate the issues, financial and emotional. And all of these emotional ones are amazing. And you're going to speak to this person about, because they're totally valid. They can't be non-validated, even if they're not validated on your legal papers, cheating, all of that. But you cannot discount those, because this has to get fixed a little bit so you can focus in on this. You can't ask somebody to do all of these financials, which is what was happening to me when I was emotionally insane. I couldn't get them done. Costs more money. It's not good for there's a better way, right? You don't take a child and put them into grade 7. They need to start here. It's the same thing. And we're not being taken care of in any way. We're coming in the worst, just like, again, the most fragile for the most part that we're showing up. And you do need that emotional support. It needs to be dealt with first, at least for a couple of hours, to let because that's what we're going to tell you anyhow. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want to hear this. And I get that now, because I can imagine like all of the things that I said to lawyers, that you're not therapists, but I couldn't, I had nowhere else to put that energy.
Yeah.
But it's such a waste of time. Lawyers make money listening to crying, I'm sure, 90%, whatever. But are we doing anything really good for the long term? I always say, wouldn't you rather be the one that's like, I went to the best lawyer. Why are they the best lawyer? Because they cared about me. You were still going to get a divorce. They could go to the shitty lawyer and still get a divorce. Okay. It might take longer. May not have as much fun. Or you can go somewhere why are they good? Why is somebody referring you? Because you did all these things. That's the business I ran. I created a company. You can go to 4 other companies to give your business to them. But why are you coming to my company? Because I'm going to do all of these extra things, which I did. I put guarantees into my sales. I wanted to be that person. I wanted to find that person that I was for somebody else in my company, and it was hard to find. Yeah. It's really hard to find, and it shouldn't be. Why? It's just horrible, like children are involved. Children aren't being given money. And again, I'm very fortunate. And I realize like I'm very fortunate because I didn't have some of the issues that some women, and I feel bad, it breaks my heart, some of the system that I see, and it's just so unfair. But life's unfair sometimes, and we just hopefully can make it a little more fair by offering something that gives somebody something, right? And that's really what it was. I think that there's hope. I think that, I think there's hope, but I wish that it was more available for people. And so many women are sad and just distraught. And I say women because I don't know. I mean, most of the marriages that I have heard about, you can tell me, like of your clients, I find like women don't really want the divorce. I feel like they've either had to have a divorce because they needed to for their own personal, all of the above. But like, most failed marriages, would you say that they're, for the most part on the side of the husband's, not for whatever reason? Or is it becoming like, I don't know the answer to that because you see the clients, like what is the dissolve of the relationships in the last year, 2 years on your end that you've seen?
Well, in Ontario, you don't actually focus too much on the reason for the breakdown of the marriage. And so statistically speaking, it's hard to say what the actual reason for the breakdown is. That's because we have a no-fault system.
I know.
Right?
But there's always a fault, though. They can say it's no fault, but we know it's a fault. But there is a fault. Even if it's not a monetary fault, there's a fault. Somebody did something to make somebody feel something, or somebody decided something, which is still, it doesn't, it's the word, again, and we go to these very technical no fault. Somebody did something. You left a company. Why'd you leave your company? You left a company for a reason. You were there for 10 years, but you left for a reason. Doesn't have to be the fault, but there's a reason somebody did it. What those reasons are.
I think the difficulty is that it's hard to pinpoint exactly what that is, right? The fault lies somewhere, and it often is a two-way street.
I thought it would be more clear, though. I thought people would be in, like, mine was like, this is why I'm getting a divorce. But you're saying it's not necessarily. So I'm wrong.
It's not very clear at all, actually. And it's a culmination of many little things, usually, that add up over time. 35 years of marriage, 10 years, 20 years, what have you. And when something does happen that precipitates the separation, sometimes it does happen. It's something catastrophic, like there's a blatant affair, somebody gets caught, somebody has to call the police and they get removed from the house, for example. Usually though, there's no, like you can't point to one thing. And even if there was,
it's not the focus. It's just not the focus.
or right, like that might just, like whatever happened, let's say, I don't know, somebody had an affair. I think a lot of the times the reality might be that that's what tipped it over the edge. But there's so much nuance to sort of what had happened prior to. And I had a friend who was dating this person who threatened that they would self-harm if
That's very common. I hear this.
If they left them, right? And so let's say that person then does something within the relationship that's not good. Like they were unfaithful to their partner. Yes, there was an affair, but the nuance to that, like the situation and the context of it all is that he was essentially forced into staying in a relationship by the threat of self-harm by the other person. And so
right. People stay for all kinds of reasons and all, like there's a million, I guess.
The point is there's so much nuance and context to every relationship that it's very, very rarely the case that there's one thing that happens,
like a specific,
one person did something wrong and therefore it's their fault and that's why the divorce happened. It's a very, and that's part of why family law is so difficult. It's so convoluted and a lot of times it gets drawn out so much. It's because there's so much to unpack.
Which is why education now is the key. I feel like this has been going on a long time. Divorce isn't new. Divorce has been going on for hundreds of years and lawyers and all of this. There's been no education on divorce. There's been no education. We hear about it. It's starting. Everything has to start. Prenups, education in school. So right now, I'll give you an example. 26, about the time that, young people are thinking about getting married. People are getting married now. And I'd like to say that I've attended a few weddings and I just feel so lucky to be in presence of people that I think are going to be like, okay, they're going to be okay. You can see, I can see sometimes you see people, and I see the young people today getting married and the support and the commitment and maybe the learned things that they've all learned over the years and they're smarter than I was and we were in our generation. Like to think that they are. Each generation's supposed to be a little bit smarter. Hopefully they'll have less divorces, but I think that they've got a better understanding of where they are today. So I'm really happy to see that. But I do feel that there's there's a time when, you're just not sure. Like nobody really knows, if it was the right time. And you have to hope. You have to just still believe in sort of that, the hope of marriage.
Yeah.
And it should be in school. I almost think it should be, in grade 12, like they're introducing now business courses for the first time. Like they didn't think that was important either, right? Like this isn't new. Like, I mean, the school system has been as an overall education need overhaul with, the amount of things that they've got to also keep kids, aware of what's going on in the world. But 100%, I would love there to be, when you apply for your marriage license, that you have to meet at a family law. They can sit in a Zoom meeting, you charge a nominal fee for education, nothing personal, just about, hey, this is what's happening. If you live with, if you end up having this, these are all like the top things that could happen. And let one couple go, God, really? I didn't know that. I didn't know that you're going to get half of that. Half of my parents' house when they die. My parents own something. They inherit it to you. You get married, you blah, blah, blah. You had no idea. But you should know. Do something. Maybe you can be protected. Maybe you don't have to do anything. Maybe you can go, I had no idea. But what if you don't know? What if you do know? Like, why is that not fair for us to know? Because if, trust me, you're going to find out.
Yeah.
You're going to find out all of it.
And it's going to hurt.
But the thing is, it's that it's no different than when you get your car. When you get anything else in life, when you buy a home, you have home insurance. When you get a car, you can't drive it without car insurance. It's against the law, actually, in Ontario. It should be against the law to get married and not know what you're getting into the contract on, because it is. And that's the thing. And if you get married, my understanding is even if you get 30 days after the marriage, you still have to apply to the courts for divorce. You don't even get a 30-day cooling off period in the old days when you bought a condo. You got 30 days. I made a mistake. I don't want the condo. You don't have a cooling off period. There needs to be a cooling off period of 10 days. For all new couples getting married in Ontario, we made a mistake. I was drunk. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't tell my parents I wanted out. Get out. 10 days.
Yeah.
No paperwork. Online, no paperwork, 2 people. I don't care how much money you came in with, you're 10 days out. That would be fair and reasonable. Pick a time. Give people an opportunity not to be so, because it's so big once you get back, like after that, it's just big and it's hard. And I don't think it has to be. It can be different, right? I'm just always looking to improve what I went through to make it, could it have been a little bit better? You know, like, could it have been? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And
it's through education.
Yeah. And I'm a huge proponent of education, and I dedicate my platform essentially to educating the public.
Well,
about
that's what this
process.
is about, right? Like letting young people, really young people, old people, whoever it is, but like whether you're getting married on the 3rd marriage or it's your first time, you just got to know what you're signing up for.
The difficulty is, you know, I can see why from a policy perspective, you don't want to make marriage and having children so prohibitive. Right, you don't want to scare off everybody from getting married and having children.
You should. I think it's scary. I think that it is one of the scariest things. Right.
But I'll push back a little bit. If we're talking on a macro level, if the scheme works so well that there's such a decline in the number of people that are willing to get married and have children,
okay,
we no longer have a society that's growing. Should that responsibility be on the shoulders of individuals who might subject themselves to an unhappy life or a sort of unhappy dynamic with their spouses? No.
Well, I don't think we're discouraging. I think we're encouraging them to do it, because not everybody should have kids either. And again, this is going back, right?
That's the point, though. I think it's going to show that a lot of people who are deciding to have kids now shouldn't have kids. Mm-hmm. And the education portion, it's going to have a preventative tone, meaning if you get divorced, this is what happens. And so you need to look out for these things. And if anything, that's going to deter people from getting married.
It's not necessarily going wrong. I think that these are just, for me, I just wished that I had the knowledge of the information. I might have still done the same thing. Might have. I don't know, right? Because I was so young. I was so young in my mind. 26 is too young and again, I feel that everybody's different, and some people would, argue and all of that. But I feel like today, where we live in such a high pressure society, money, it's really expensive. We're living in Toronto, right? We're living in a city, in any metropolitan city, anywhere right now. You need a certain income. You need a certain lifestyle to make it work. I mean, that's sort of reality. And if you want to share that with someone, you better just know what you're getting into. And you're going to continue that, right? And understanding, I just think that people need to protect their, you've got your own, your own company. Do you want to give that up? Do you understand? Does somebody understand? Did I understand that when I got married? Because I don't think I did. If I had my own company, ABC company, and I got married, I don't think that I would have most people wouldn't understand that in 2 years we're going to get a divorce, but now you're getting half my company and I owe you support because I owe you blah, 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 blah. What? I didn't understand. I didn't get it, because there's nobody that explained that to me. If it's explained simply, make it in a pamphlet. There should just be you're getting married when you show up. Just something for people to understand what it is and what everything means. And about the home. The biggest thing that, the matrimonial home is obviously a huge part of discussion. Who owns the home? Who's staying in the home? Who's living in the home? Who's going to, all of that becomes, whose name is in the home? Like ownership of the home. If you're happy, lucky enough to own the home, that's another issue. And who should remain in the home is its own entity, right? And that becomes its own train of everything. So, yeah, there's just a lot. And
there's a lot to understand. There's a lot of knowledge that needs to go around. There's a lot of education that needs to happen for people to, make educated decisions, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what people need to do. Is we're not saying you should do this or you should do that. don't get married if you don't want to, get married if you want to. But if you don't have the knowledge base and the education necessary to understand what is happening
But
when you
it's
make
so
those
easy
choices.
though. I researched, like I Googled how to get married in Ontario, and it's like the simplest thing. Like it's not complicated.
Also, I don't mean the logistics of getting married, but all the consequences that arise.
No, but
from
just
having,
the actual paper, like to get married, to get a marriage license is very simple. Like you just go down to City Hall and you present your identity.
Right.
Like it's just a very simple process. It's like as soon as you sign off on that, that's the flip. Like it's really easy going in, not as easy coming out. There's so much struggle right now for young people to be looking. They can't get jobs. I see this every day. They don't have housing. I just saw a post, which is, again, nothing to do with this, but it has to do with children. Students are going to Guelph and Queens this year, and for the first time, they don't have housing. They took more students. You have universities taking money from people, good people, and I see these young kids, that could be my kid. When my kids went to university, I needed them to live at residence. Where are they going to live? There's a purpose. If you're going to school, away from school, I wanted my child to be at a certain place, not housing. That's not what we signed up for. We're not giving the children, there's no spots right now for housing. There's a lot of people around in Ontario. There's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people all over. If you're going to have kids, you need to look after them until they are no longer, or you're no longer able to. We don't stop at 18. 18 is a really crazy number to think that they're adults and they could be you're no longer needing to be responsible. The court says, the law says, you don't have to pay support. I'm so sorry to tell you that most 18-year-olds I know can't pay their phone bill and can't get a summer job this year. Can't, because it's really hard. So it's really the courts better change the life is not working. You have kids that parents are now off the hook because they're like, well, I don't even have to pay you. They didn't even want their kids. They don't want to pay for their kids. I see that as well. Don't have kids because they're expensive. They're really expensive, and I'm here to tell you. And I only have 2 of them, and I love them, but they're very expensive.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't have kids if you don't want kids. And both of you better want kids, because there's 2 people, 2, right? And I don't understand this. I'm not paying for child support. That's a whole other, I don't get it. And that people have to go to court continuously. This isn't just, I'm lucky I didn't have this, but like 3-4 times, and they're not paying and they won't pay. And it's just nonsense to me. Nonsense. They go get the car, sell the car, then we'll see how that works for them. Like I'm very, you know what? No, I think there's a lot of leniency, and I think it would be a little bit quicker to, hard, facts to you pay. And there shouldn't be any choice about this. I am really strong about that. Children are suffering. They're the only ones that suffer in this anyhow. Who's suffering if you have children in this divorce? If you're not paying support, how is this helping anything? Or using the children? I see everyday parents, they're arguing about, one father didn't want to change their clothes. I hear this a lot. Like I hear people like being mean to the kids to get back at the wife to say, look, I'm not even going to change their clothes on my days off. Like, again, really? A lot
of pettiness for sure.
It must be very difficult. And again, then don't have children, because it's really a lifelong responsibility to be a parent.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really the hardest job. And there's no real, sometimes you'll get cake and you don't get rewards. You don't get days off. Yeah. It's unpaid job. but it's the most rewarding thing. But they're used, right? But they're used in the courts and probably much more than they should. And that's on them. That's on the people doing it. Whoever's doing it, right? I just hope for better outcomes for someone who's going through this. That's what I wanted to really come here today, because I went through it and I didn't have any support that I felt would have been, helpful, because you're alone. You are completely alone, no matter how many friends you have, no matter all of that. This is the most alone time. It's different than cancer. It's different than medical, because when you're sick, people want to help you. When you're going through divorce, they're like at the plague, like, okay. So a little bit of this, there's shame. There's a lot of things like, you're a bit of a failure. You were not successful. I was married and I was not successful at something, and I wanted to be successful at everything I did. I don't sign up for unsuccess. That seems silly.
Yeah.
I mean, I put a lot of effort into it. So there's a lot of embarrassment. There's a lot of like, oh my God, like I just couldn't get it to work. Like it was a long haul, you know? But if I can say anything, it's just, you know what? I needed to believe in myself when nobody, and it was hard. Like there's days when I honestly, I didn't think I'd make it through. Like you'd need good friends and family, but you know.
I recall from our initial conversation, what you said to me was quite profound, and it stuck with me, which was that, you know, at the time when your parents have passed, that was an extremely trying time for you.
Sure.
Until you went through your divorce, that was even worse than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and that stuck with me. And it
sticks with me every day, and I have to remember how strong I was to, you know, lose 2 parents in 1 year when you're 40 years old with 2 babies. Without being in a good marriage. I knew I wasn't in a good marriage, but they just, you know, and so you want to be, you know, I wanted to even make the marriage work more actually, because my parents just died and I didn't want them to know that. I wanted them to think that everything was going to be okay. Don't worry, everything's fine. I'm going to, you know. The heartbreak. Well, because I think at the end of the day, when you lose people you love, and you know that they loved you back, you have love. That's what we want. It's really simple. We're not that complicated out here. You know, we need some basic, and we need love. However, that love comes in to make you happy, and everybody feels love differently. But when you feel loved, you feel it. And when you lose love, for me, I think that it's hard, but you knew that you had it and they loved you. When you lose somebody in a divorce, you knew that they didn't love you. You didn't love them. And then basically what you have is just the loss of nothing. There's no love. And that's what I felt. I felt that there was just that loss where there was nobody that gave me back anything. How much is it important that you work with the other lawyer and that you get along with the lawyer? Like, do you need to, like, at some level, do the 2 lawyers need to be able to professionally engage in conversation, as opposed to some lawyers don't like that lawyer either, and then you have lawyers that don't like each other on top of 2 people that don't like each other?
it helps immensely.
Right.
It helps immensely because at the very least, assuming the 2 clients are represented by a lawyer, there's at least 4 people involved in that exchange. Even if every one of them are excellent communicators, some information will get missed, right? Because we're playing telephone tag. And the benefit of having 2 lawyers who get along with one another is if there are sort of those voids they find within their communication, they can call each other up and say, hey, like, what is this? So they can be proactive about any problems that may come up in the future. And if they can trust the other lawyer that they are reasonable and they're not going to do anything out of pocket, they can talk to them about being reasonable. They can talk to them about settlement opportunities.
But if you're having that conversation and a lawyer's like, you know what, I know your client has this much money and I have no interest, you hear, I'm just throwing stuff out. What do you do, right? Like, it's hard. It's hard on you now. Like, you've just got another element here. Like, oh, here we go. Like, this is going to be hard it's going to be a hard case. You know it's going to be a hard case sometimes, right? And you don't want it to be a hard case, but you know the other lawyers already. I had somebody say to me, oh, that law firm only takes big cases, or they must see money, or this or that. Like, and again, when you have to find a lawyer, and you have to find a professional now based on not their profession, because now that's off the table. Now it's, where are they going? Like, what's the word on the street on them? Because each lawyer, the more that you're in the business now, you have your reputation in that lawyer's firm. The courts know who you are. This one knows who you are. So we're coming into the ring, your ring. It's not my ring. You were there first. I'm coming in and I got to navigate all that. And so you have to navigate all that as well. So for all of us, it's no wonder that this takes 3 years, 4 years. People change lawyers. People do this, people do that, because it's like, it's not a guarantee. There's a lot here that has to work out for it to work out, right? Everybody's got to be a little bit happy in order to get those papers signed.
The running sad joke is that actually it's not about making everybody happy. It's making everybody equally unhappy.
Yes. But court is a scary word. We talk about the word court. I was the most fearful He was really good at threatening. Like the people like to threaten court. That's the other thing. I'm going to take you to court, which again, these are all loose terms, doesn't really mean anything because going to court is a whole procedure. It's court conferences and people think you go to court. It's like that whole, there's a lot of steps because the courts apparently you don't want to go to court. Anybody that wants to go to court, I don't understand. You're asking one person to make a decision and they don't get it because people are not understanding the process. I think I've understood the process better, really clearly. Maybe watch a video, send a video of what court looks like. Maybe people's perception is too much TV, like Johnny Depp's having fun, like look at this go. It's true. Like we grew, during COVID, the Johnny Depp trial was on. There was a lot of like divorce stuff is out there. But I don't think to actually, I tried to find YouTube videos on court so I could prepare myself for court. Who doesn't want to prepare themselves for court? I don't want to go in. I've never been to court. I'd like to know. And there really isn't anything, but it would be great to be able to look at something to have before people want to, like, you want to be a criminal? This is what the jails look like. We know. Do you want to do that? This is what going to court in divorce looks like. Are you sure you want to do that? Because these are all the other options. People are visualizers. Let's, put it out there. That's just, I'm saying, give people the choices because we're sitting around like sometimes waiting, not knowing. And, I think that the court, as scary as it was for me, because he was very big at threatening, I'm going to take you to court. And I'm like, okay, take me to court. I didn't do anything. That's the other thing. I'm like, you're taking me to court. Okay. Right. And eventually I went to court and I was really afraid to go to court. It was probably the most, like, I wanted to settle just to avoid going to court, even if it costs more money. So you just don't want to go I just didn't want to go there. I went and it was successful. You know why? Because if you go to court in any way and you present your case with the facts and your facts are presentable, then you should be able to have a positive outcome. In a little bit, divorce is kind of funny with what your outcomes are looking for. But at the end of the day, I was happy that, that I wasn't afraid to go. But it isn't fun. I think a lot of things could be, taken off before that happens as well.
Yeah. And so can I ask, did you end up reaching a settlement or was it an order that was received?
I looked at it like I accepted a settlement because I was the one who needed to say, I'm not going to continue this, because I think part of it is it takes two people to make that decision. He has to, or she, right? It was he's and she's and all of that. Because I don't want to be unfair to people because, I don't want it to be like, I'm just presenting my story. And I know there's a million others and I'm here to support everybody's, not just like a female males. I understand the dynamics. And so I'm just speaking from mine. I don't want to, make people feel that I'm, not inclusive, not at all. Everybody's deserving of all of it, whatever. Nobody deserves any of that. And everybody deserves to have happiness. So from that perspective, but I mean, he really, he was difficult to work with, my ex, and the lawyer was difficult. The lawyer it was confirmed by him because I spoke to him and it was confirmed that the lawyer wanted this to go to court. He did not want him to take the settlement. He didn't want to take anything. And I was like, okay, so now you want to settle and your lawyer wants to take me to court. Fantastic. And which gave me a bit of okay, here we go. Okay. And that's when I showed up in court that day and I looked and we were, I wasn't afraid to look at the lawyers. I mean, I don't care how much, again, I was so battered. When you're so battered at that point, I felt I'd already lost everything. I'd lost my whole life. I'd lost my marriage. That was already enough for me. And then now you want to take me to court. You don't want to settle with me. Let's go. And I think what happened was, presented my case and a settlement had to be made. I'm the one who I feel offered a settlement acceptance, I suppose, or however somebody has to accept something. And I think I was just feeling fortunate that it was over, that I didn't have to argue with anybody else. But to this day, I think that it's just an acceptance, not a settlement. I accepted what was happening to happen. It's not really I settled for it because there's no settling in this. It's a funny word, again, I always say it's all these words that you fit into a sentence. I think it could be another word. I think it's just sort of, I agreed to not go back to court tomorrow. How's that? There's a, I lost. I didn't gain. There's no gain here. Whether you kept a house, you didn't keep the house. It's a big, I spent money to get here. And if I already put in now the lawyers, I found people that weren't lawyers that are a bit of a, that they call them the people that, that sort of prey on people that are really like already really low, and they sort of come in and they can, it's like a word for it. I can't think of it right now, but I felt when I was really at my lowest and looking for help, I found some people that, said they were going to help. They weren't even lawyers, but they said that they work with lawyers and they can help, and they're divorce consultants, and
like
they're marketing
divorce coaches
and consultants, and they made me believe that they were going to be cheaper and help me. Again, we try all these things in the process because there's not like a one page that just you open up and goes, here's what to do. You've got to pull. I did, and none of that was helpful. All it was me realizing that I had to be in charge of myself. I think that's really it. Nobody can help you with if you didn't get any help getting in, then you got to kind of get out on your own. And the lawyer's only there for the paperwork and to take what you're saying and put it on paper and see if it makes sense. And that's what the number is. It's really that simple. It seems to me like that. The end of the day, it's it's the numbers, right? We always come back to the numbers. But there are numbers, and that's how the lawyer listens to putting the numbers in. There is something to be said about that, because if they don't understand, again, it's this whole, communication. And hopefully through, our talks today, people hear that, wow, I can talk to my lawyer and say, I don't agree with you. Because I think we're afraid to tell people that we're paying for a service because they're so much smarter. I'm not the lawyer. But it's not about being smarter. It's about, did you understand what I said? It's an understanding and communication, which is the same reason you got a divorce, or the same reason something didn't happen necessarily, or that there was a breakdown, because somebody is not hearing the other person for whatever it is. And yeah, I was excited to be able to share my story in a place where I didn't even think anybody would, everybody has a story. And is my story that much more interesting than somebody else's? I don't think so. I think a lot of, a friend of mine always says to me, is really good at this actually, is I'm not special. I'll always think I'm special, and she'll always be my reminder, but you're not special. You're special in your home to your kids and hopefully your parents and your spouse, because the unit that thinks you're special. But in the real world, nobody really thinks you're special. But we all want to feel special, and I'd get mad at her and I'll go, but I am special. Well, yeah, but you're not special. Lots of people, this one got divorced, and that's what she means. And I think that, we're all special. We are all special in that place. But, at the end of the day, there's lots of people who are going through much worse scenarios. And yeah, I just want to try to make, if I can give somebody heard one thing that maybe I would have wanted to hear, that's great. That's perfect. I've done it. I helped one person a little bit.
Yeah. I really like the idea of providing value by, creating a platform in which people can share their stories, because a lot of the times many things are difficult about going through a divorce, but one of those many things is feeling so alone, right? There's so much uncertainty, and you can't talk about it with anybody. And even if you have people that you can talk to about, it's very hard for people to relate to you, because what you're going through it's such a profound event in your life. And so when somebody else says, I've been through what you're going through, I've been in this situation, and that person can relate and sort of grow that comfort in knowing that they're not alone and that it's a shared experience, that's empowerment, right? That's giving light to somebody that didn't think that it was possible for them to get out of this dark hole that they find themselves in, right? And so, obviously, everything that we're talking about from a practical standpoint, how to find the right lawyer, what you need to do to get to the right lawyer, what you should do, what you should not do, equally as important. But another component that I'm particularly excited about in doing this podcast is people just knowing that they're not alone. And this is actually a very common shared experience. But it just so happens
the
nobody talks
community is
about
very
it.
quiet, right? Like, again, being divorced is very different than anything else that, you know. And again, most of my world was married people, happy people, fantastic. Yes, many divorces as well, but never really thought too much about it and never really realized. But I think also when you're in it, you also know that it's going to be a bad divorce. I think you also know these things. It's like, I don't want to you avoid things you don't like. I know I'm going to have to get a divorce. It's going to be worse than the marriage. Am I running? I'll just take another day. It's like, you know, when you don't want to wake up and you want 5 more minutes. I just want 5 more minutes. I really didn't want that. And it lasted for like, you know, maybe 10 years, but it's okay because it's all about when. It's all about the now and the when and just trying my best to be in that place because it's way better. No matter how sad I am sometimes, and you have sadness because I miss having the wanting to be in the relationship that I wanted. I wanted the marriage. I wanted to be in a partnership. I think that we need partners. I think life is hard on your own. I don't think we're supposed to be on our own the whole time, to be honest. I think that life is better with a partner, whether you're married, not married, in your business. I always worked with partners. It's hard to run your own company. It's hard to do anything on your own, right? And to always be there. So of course I'm sad for not having that, but it is definitely better now that I'm over here to know that being there was definitely not better. I thought it was better. People will say at the time that was where to be and everything else, and that may have been that's why I was. But at least I know now that, you know, because I'm here today talking to you. And if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be here today talking to you. So I know that this is all the right thing. And then you just have to sometimes know that. You just have to trust it, you know? And I also think what helped me a little bit is talking into recording myself and speaking as if I was in court. I did that a lot. And I have to start deleting them because some of them are really like, I mean, it's very, very therapeutic. But I actually went every day for like, you know, just because I was so much going through my head to want to get it out. And so I would basically put my phone on and give my spiel as if I was in the court and speaking to the judge and the lawyers about my case. And then I would go back in and I would listen to myself to understand, is that what you want? Like, is that what you want to present, whether I'm saying it or not? And I really was able to, therapy-wise, kind of condense down to getting it out. It's actually just getting it out of here. You need to get it out. You feel all those feelings. You feel every single thing. So I needed to get it out and be heard. You want to be heard, right? You want to be somebody to be like, yes, I hear you. It must have been horrible, whatever it is. And I think that also that you should work with someone that believes your case. I mean, when you work with someone and let's say somebody's coming in and as a lawyer, as a person, you know that they are not telling you the truth, that they lied and they cheated. Can you easily just take that on? I mean, that's the thing of a lawyer. That's the role, which is a very hard thing to do, which is why I'm not a lawyer, because I'd probably be like, no, I don't like you. I would. I'd be like, I don't really know. I think, no, she deserves more than I'm not going to help you. Right? Because honestly, it's not for everybody, but like, it must be difficult. It must be very difficult. And what do you do when you come across a client that is a compulsive liar and a narcissist and you know is the worst client? Somebody's going to take him on, right?
Somebody got to take him on. And like I said, there's only 2 options, right? You either resign from the case or you take them on. The dynamic is very difficult. You know, I am like, as a lawyer myself, I'm sympathetic to both sides. There's a gap for sure in the skill set that the lawyers can have to try and make the process as smooth as possible and client oriented. Mm-hmm. It's also education on the client's end to know what it is that they should be asking for from their lawyer, to know their rights and obligations, not just within the divorce sphere, but as a client of a lawyer, and to know more about the process so that if there are forces out there that are trying to take advantage of your ignorance, that you don't let that happen because you know
Right.
better, right?
But the thing is, and again, just you said something that made me think about my day in court and this lawyer, going back to this lawyer. And I've worked with all kinds of lawyers in my career, all corporate lawyers, real estate, like all different types of lawyers. And I respect all the lawyers, respect everyone I work with. So this lawyer from this big law firm shows up in court, we're on Zoom, and he's reading off of whatever, it's like his first day looking, it's very unorganized for it. And it's just, I'm sitting, and he says, she's malicious. Starts name calling me, very bad name, like just name calling like a 3-year-old. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you're not even like, like you don't have anything. You're just like, you're literally going through, no, very deceitful. It's very deceitful. And then you put their papers down, and I'm sitting there going, this is court. This is your $900 an hour. Like, this is ridiculous. Waste of money. Because I think if you're going to call me a name, you better have something to say about it. That's my point. If I'm malicious and I'm this and I'm that, give it to me. And I was really pissed off. So I spoke to my lawyer. And I'm like, he name called me. He went to court and he name called me. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So relax. Like this whole like, I'm like, no, what do you mean? Like, you can't name call me. He doesn't get to name call me. Well, it's okay. It's just for the show. And it's all like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, understanding like a little bit what's going on. But like, I'm sitting here going, you don't get to name call me. Like, who are you, lawyer person, to sit across in your office and where you are? You've never met me before, by the way. Never met me. I don't care what your client told you about me. There's nothing on paper that says I've done anything. There's no proof of anything. And you just name called me. You should be embarrassed for yourself as a person. That was my reaction. I don't care that you're a lawyer. You just, whatever title you have to call another human being a name, not the client, the lawyer, and had never spoken to me a day. That was the first time we laid eyes on each other after 3 years. And he knew his client was not something that he should be doing, but he did it to him. He did it. And I think that's where my respect, if I acted like this in business and any other business, if he went to a client and called my client and went to spoke to somebody like this, they would have been fired. They would have been, well, who does that? That's why my divorce, my thoughts about divorce lawyers, when I saw that, and that happens all the time, was like, really, there's a problem. There's a problem. And that's the demise of it all, because I can't work with that. I couldn't work with that. And that was the last time. And I think he knew. I think I actually looked right at him, like, because I wish I was in person, because I was like, I was very respectful, but I really wanted to call him up and be like, how dare you name call me? I don't care that you're a divorce lawyer. You can say you're sorry because you're a liar and it didn't mean anything. Of course I didn't, but I did want to call the other lawyers though. Just, you should let me know if it's like a good idea or bad. I'll get some little advice. I did want to call the 2 lawyers that told me that I'd never settle and blah, 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 and just let them know that I've finally did it without them. Sort of that, by the way, hi, remember me? The one that you thought, but.
I mean, it's not going to add anything.
No, I know. But it's just sort of that satisfaction. It's like, but they were so confident that, that I would never do this on my own, and to know that I did it, to know that they were wrong and people are wrong. And I think that lawyers are wrong sometimes. And they're, it's a hard group. It's a very difficult group of individuals because most of the time they are the talkers in family court. They are given that power. That's why we went them. That's why they're giving all the, all the big bucks. And at the end of the day, there needs to be a little bit more accountability. There needs to be a balance. And once there's a balance, and the system has to change too, they're bankrupting the families. The courts, like, it's horrible, horrible. There's nothing more to say about it. The money is leaving the families and there's no way it's coming back in. So I don't know what they're going to do about that.
It's difficult, and I don't know what the answer is. It is immensely expensive.
It's criminal. It's actually criminal that this money is being wasted without decisions. I understand if there was a decision made at the end of that day, but sometimes there's not even a decision made, right? Like they just come back tomorrow and you spent $30,000 in court. I don't know.
Yeah, the balance is very hard to strike. As somebody who's in the system and who works as a lawyer advocating for people, and to be fair, it's not as simple as things should be quicker, decisions should be made more efficiently, and there should be less money spent on the process, because what that gives rise to are people getting decisions by the court that's just unjust.
But I've
Right.
read the cases because the cases are all available, and I read them, and I
right,
read
but-
there's just awful things that are being presented, like just lies upon lies, and people like lying blatantly about their finances. Like there's cases that I've read that are very like the judges come down and said, you know what you have done is so bad. Not, lying to your ex-wife and not, properties. Like people are really spiteful. Like people do horrible things.
So let me put it to you this way. So, and I'm very sympathetic to people in that situation, 100%.
Yeah.
But I just want to give some context as to why it's a bit more nuanced than that, right? So like our frustration right now is somebody can come in and start lying about all of their finances and then drag that on for years, and in the process just bankrupt the other person.
Yeah.
And that's their tactic.
Right.
The solution to that problem would be we would have to sort of reel back on the level of scrutiny we give to those lies, let's say. That's fine if we assume that somebody is lying for the sake of self-gain, right? But at the same time, the danger of that is the court then has to jump to other conclusions more quickly too, without that scrutinous process. So if somebody instead of saying, I've got no money, says, my wife is a malicious person, and there's no process to invalidate that statement because you know that that's a lie, that's also a problem. What I do appreciate and what I do acknowledge is that the system isn't perfect, and that there are many people who fall in those gaps that exist within the system right now. The problem is, we can try and fill those gaps with solutions, but those solutions create other holes for other people to fall into. And I don't know what the right balance is. Is love real to you?
Yeah, for sure. I love love. I love the idea of love. I believe in love. I believe that just because I didn't have it with him doesn't mean that I didn't have love in my life. I did have love in my life from my family, from my friends that care about me, that you know what love is when you're not doing well and somebody calls you and cares and checks in on you. That's love. What is love? Love is all kinds of things as well. I definitely would like to assume that there'll be another, that I would have a partner, but life will take whatever road, and we'll see.
Anything else that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to, Doreen?
No, I feel like we've gone. Like I just, I made my little notes, and I know that I just was really glad that I had this opportunity to come and, speak to a person as opposed to my, speaking like I told you before, because I think that people are sometimes just afraid to talk, and they don't even know if they have something that's positive that's going to help somebody. So
yeah, we're putting out a lot of positive energy, and I'm really glad you're a part of it. And I thank you for being a part of it. And
well, thanks for having me come down.
If you'd like to share your story in this podcast, or if you need a family lawyer, go to my website, jleefamily.com. That's JLEE family.com. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's going to be okay.